This is Detective Consolidated. It was August 26, 2018. It's 5:25 p.m. So
You may just want to stay up here for the next 2 weeks. All right, let's go get that juror. We're going to bring in the new juror. Amy, did you do Gina Wells? Do you know a gal named Gina Wells? When we released the juror, I went up to the
All rise.
Just have a seat right there, first seat. Everyone can have a seat. What we're going to do is one of the jurors had to be removed, and so you will now be on the panel. And we originally gave you an oath as an alternate, but now we'll give you an oath as to be a regular juror. Go ahead.
You can stand and raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will diligently inquire into and carefully deliberate all matters between the state of Ohio and the defendant? That you will do so to the best of your skill and understanding, that you will do so fairly and without bias or prejudice, that you will render a true verdict according to the law and the evidence?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, take it back. All right. Everyone can have a seat. You ready, Tammy? Back on the record, 19 CR 1662. State of Ohio versus Andrew Mitchell. Counsel, do we need to put anything on the record prior to bringing in the jury?
I think we've discussed everything back in chambers that we need to.
That's correct. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, let's go get the jury. Do you guys have an exhibit list put together? Or?
Yes, it's.
Will you just give me a copy at some point?
Work in progress, but I'll go ahead and give you this one right now.
Well, you can keep it. We'll, out of break, get a copy. Typically, we have exhibit as. Otherwise, I have to.
It's pretty sketchy still. Okay.
That's two football scenes. We picked the guy with the ball. Okay. Right. I think I decided yes. We I don't know if we are. Okay.
All rise.
Let's come down the other road. Everyone can have a seat. Everyone have a good evening last night? Yeah. All right, wonderful. We're going to begin the state's case in chief. Any witnesses on behalf of the state of Ohio?
Sean, our first witness will be Officer Mcdaniel.
Hopefully it didn't rain on you guys when you were out there.
Yes, it
Oh, it did?
You can hope that.
I should have, but.
Stan, you never sworn in.
Little maze around here. I should put.
Wide load too.
Yellow tape all the way up here. Can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury your testimony in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat, pull yourself up close to the microphone, and you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name, introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, sorry. My name's Officer Matthew McDaniel. Been in the department for 14 years, work the Old Town East area.
That's Columbus Division of Police.
Yes, ma'am.
So you were working back on August 23rd, 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
In what capacity on that day?
I was working the 19th precinct that day, which was on the Hilltop, on first shift. I was there for about a month at that point.
And do you work in a marked cruiser in uniform?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Working alone or with a partner that day?
I was alone that day.
What were your hours that day?
That day I was scheduled for 7A to 3P. Not sure if I was there for longer or not after 3, but those are my scheduled duty hours.
During the course of the day, were you directed to the area of Bellows and Yale?
Yes, ma'am.
Please explain how so.
I was sitting at the substation and I heard a officer in trouble call come over the radio. They didn't know exactly the location of it at first, so I got my cruiser, ran out, and got there as fast as I could once I figured out where it was at. So I was a few miles away from what I remember. So
All right, so you said an officer in trouble call. Is there a specific code for a call like that?
it's at 10-3.
So you hear this on your radio, and you immediately get in your cruiser and respond to the area?
Yep.
And you said it took you a few minutes to get there?
Yeah, probably a few minutes because I was new to the area, so I really didn't know where that was at. So I had to pull up my map and kind of direct myself in. So it took me a little bit.
All right, and do you know who put out the 10-3? What officer did that?
I don't recall that day, no. I believe it came over, from what I do recall, it just kind of came over the radio. It wasn't like the original officer that was calling in the 10-3. So like, to explain, if I were to call in a 10-3, I'd call it on my radio, 10-3, because it's readily available right here. Where that doesn't happen all the time. And it does happen to us where an officer might have somebody else call in a 3 because, and that's what we have a 3, 10-3, because they might not have a radio available. They might have a cell phone. And that gets confusing because you don't always know what's going on if it's not the original officer. So that's why I explained my confusion about trying to get to the location. So,
Very good. So you go to the area of Bellows and Yale. What do you find there?
when I initially respond, from what I recall, there were two citizens off to the side in a vehicle parked next to the apartment building. Officer Carter, who's one of our canine officers, is there rendering aid to an officer that's Officer Mitchell to a laceration to his hand, and there's a female in the back seat, appeared to be deceased, from what I recall.
You mentioned Officer Mitchell. Did you know him that day? Were you familiar with him?
I did not know. That was the first time I ever seen him.
So when you arrived on the scene, were you even aware whether or not he was an officer?
Only because Officer Carter was rendering aid to him, and that's basically my assumption.
So you said there were two witnesses, or what
Yeah.
appeared to be witnesses?
What appeared to be, there were people off to the side basically saying, I think they had their hands up saying, we're not involved or something to the fact. I can't recall exactly what they said, but I just remember they were off to the side, and then Officer Carter was at the side of the car rendering aid.
Did you have any interaction with those civilians?
I did at some point. I don't know. I can't recall the entire encompassment of what it was. I talked to the two people, I think, to try to get them in cruisers. I think at one point, I can't remember exactly what my total interaction was with those people.
But you didn't do any substantive interviewing of them or anything of
No,
that sort?
no, ma'am.
Very good. So you said when you got there, Mitchell was on the ground, is that right?
Yeah, from what I recall, just from memory, I remember him he was seated next to the vehicle, kind of laid back on the door, driver's side door, and Officer Carter was rendering aid to him. I can't remember which hand it was that was cut, but.
And what did you do at the scene?
Basically, in that scenario, I'd kind of switched into, okay, we need to secure the scene, check on the person in the back seat, you know, to see if she's, you know, alive, whatever. For what I could, you know, what appeared to be, she was deceased in the back seat. So through my experience at shooting scenes just over the years, I don't want to add my fingerprints and such to a scene. So I didn't really touch anything at the time because she just appeared to be deceased. And kind of just stood by while, you know, there's a firearm. I remember laying on the ground, I believe. So I just kind of stood there to secure the scene, make sure nobody walked up on that area until other officers arrived to help out.
You had body camera on that day, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You have body camera on today?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the same or similar sort of
Yes,
camera that you had that day?
Same model. Yes, ma'am.
Back then, were body cameras relatively new to you?
Yeah, they were.
But did you operate yours on that day?
Yes.
Could you explain to ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that body cam works?
So on that date, it's different now. On that date, when you press the button, it has a look back. So this is always recording, but at basically every minute, it kind of erases the last minute as it goes. This is the way it was explained to me. I'm no expert. But so when you hit the button, it starts recording audio and everything from that point on. Before that point, there was no audio. Now today, there's 2 minutes of look back with audio and video with the new technology. But that day, it was just a minute look back with no audio.
So back then, you press it and you get 1 minute of silence, but you get video of what was happening that minute,
correct.
right? And then you start getting audio from that point forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you've seen the body camera video at least once from that day?
I think I did, maybe during grand jury, but since then, I haven't seen it.
I'm just going to go with today's. I'm going to ask, Your Honor, that we place State's Exhibit B. We'll stop and make sure you recognize this as your
Is it
body
E
cam, and then I'm going to play it. B as in boy.
E as in boy. All right,
No objection, Your Honor.
okay.
Does this appear to be a view of you driving to that scene in your cruiser?
Yes, ma'am.
We may need, do we need to dim the lights a little? Will that help anybody? Yes, we do. Okay, so we have silence here. So this is the look back we're talking about, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Why don't we pause for just a minute? Is this you approaching the scene, and would that be Mr. Carter, Officer Carter's vehicle?
Yes, this is the vehicle on the left is Officer Carter's vehicle with his canine, and those are the two individuals I was explaining.
Okay, those were the two civilians that were detained and talked to at some point.
At some point, yeah.
We'll continue on a little bit further here. Go ahead and stop for a minute. So as you walked up, is this a fair and accurate representation of what you saw of the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? And who do we see off to the left of the screen?
The far left is Officer Carter, and he's putting a tourniquet on Officer Mitchell's arm, his right arm, right to the door there.
All right? Continue. Pause there. Would that be you opening the back door?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And we're going to probably see a little bit clearer, but what did you note in the back seat?
It was the decedent laying in the back seat. Opened the door to check if she was alive, or what we could do at that point. If we needed to render aid or whatnot, and she appeared to be deceased.
So we've had our 1 minute look back. This is where the audio starts picking up and continues the rest of the duration, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Very good.
You want to take him to 8 and 16 sub? You want Matic meet you there? No. Don't touch it.
Yeah, we're gonna need the
My sister
northbound,
starts moving a lot.
the north side of the apartment building.
Yeah.
Shut down so no one can drive around the back. The Fellows and Yale shut down so nobody can come westbound. We're going to need the alley here shut down. That is just to the west of the department.
Yeah, the guy is great.
154 officers, 4 lanes. We're going to one officer support.
You alright, brother?
Yeah, go ahead and making any notifications to have Officer Undercover.
Do you know who the officer in the white?
I don't recall his last name off the top of my head. I'm embarrassed to say that. I believe his first name's Todd. He's still currently works on 19A Company.
So at this point, other officers are arriving. We
Yeah,
see
they're-
that Officer Mitchell and Officer Carter are off to the side by that cruiser, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah. You're good. That's why I'm staying here.
One witness, and then I need another car for another witness. I think there's 42 of them. Yeah, so here, all this under our law. That's enough. That's fine.
You might want to just throw her in a car too. She was with him though. In the end. Yeah. That's what it seems like. Yeah, that's what I'm saying here.
I did move his gun a little bit, but I was.
Well, he had pretty much-
It was like right, that's when I got here, so he was sitting right here leaning against the.
Is that Officer Carter who's talking to you?
Yes, ma'am. The one in the black uniform is Officer Carter, and he was
And he-
explaining that.
He was explaining that he moved the gun slightly?
That's what he said in the video, yeah.
Did you see the gun there still on the ground?
Yeah, when I'm standing here, I'm watching the gun sitting there, basically.
Yeah, I'm headed down. Just gonna probably run the swing figure all this out.
She shot in the back of his head.
That's not free yet. We're on 9100 is moving to get the mobile sub up there.
We're gonna need somebody to see alleyway up here.
That's it. We can train him around. Yeah, probably just put them on Yale. We'll take over all Yale between Fellows
Address for the rear up.
I will get you,
We gave that away to the north here for blocking off that.
Is there medics on scene now?
Yes, ma'am.
She had moved now. But since the gun was there, and she looked pretty dead going, eh. Yeah, cut him on his hand. What is it, a window thing? Yeah.
So, wait, who shot her?
The officer.
Okay.
Might as well.
Looking up to your people, finding someone shot. They didn't know.
Yeah, we didn't know until we got here.
They didn't let us know we didn't know until we got here.
The,
I know, since we saw the drop.
yeah. And then
Yeah, he's a vice guy.
yeah. Then the trickle down of information probably wouldn't have got to you anyways in time.
You got a guard log? I'll get it.
Nah, I'm staying with the guns, so.
Matt.
I copy. We have everything blocked off, and it will still be blocked off down there.
Just heart still beating.
I don't know if her heart's still beating or not, but.
Okay.
yeah, Ken, we have the immediacy closed off good enough. We're just gonna need, just keep from anyone else down here wanting to, see what's going on. The 154, I'm getting off the picture now. The officer involved is here at the 365 address. We're, in the rear of the apartment complex, you can't shoot right now. Alright, I'll be back there in about a minute. Just advise, squads are on the way. We will be needing a cruiser to handle everything just to the west of the apartment complex down the alley.
She's still showing a pulse.
Come back by.
195.
They are to be transporting the suspect here in a couple seconds. So come get this call medic 10 out.
I can follow if you want.
Follow medic 10.
Alright.
No, I do. Can we make it?
How would I do?
I'm available on the telephone. Take my call.
Hey, where, do you wanna?
Do we have you where he's going on the mission?
We have 3 shots here.
Okay, 9194, 98, go take the medic, please. Perfect, thank you.
This is Channel 3. What's the on your 43?
365 South Gale.
I'll be over slowly.
Copy.
5224.
5224.
Medical police aware attorneys are responding to report.
Okay.
291.
291.
He is going to reach with medic 10 to the hospital.
Okay. We have a condition.
And we are suspect.
I copy. Do we have a condition?
Say critical life threatening a little bit.
She's critical.
Copy.
Radio, go ahead. Have someone first in the thing. We'll take this all back day.
Did you want to monitor?
Yeah, that's confirmed. Please, in the beginning.
Okay.
They're gonna wanna push back even more, I bet.
Copy.
Nice.
One second, let me pull it up so they can on the shut down.
It all happened inside the car, from what it seems like, casing and stuff like that. Should we shut off?
I'm gonna make the call, go ahead and shut it off.
All right. Does that adequately capture what you saw that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Looks like there was a little confusion with the medics. Did the medics not realize they needed 2 medics and what was going on?
Objection, Your Honor. Cause for speculation.
Overruled.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Was there confusion with the medics or not enough medics showing up?
It depends on the scene, if multiple medics show up or not. A lot of times on shooting scenes, they do have multiple medics. I think there was confusion on where we were at, because like I said, I hardly even knew where we were at even. So pretty late in the video, you can hear me mark with where we were at, and I don't know if that was the first time that the actual location was known for medics to respond or not.
Turn off your phones. Everybody have their phones off.
So yeah, so I that could have been part of the confusion where we didn't know, in particular where to send the medics to at that point. So I think maybe that was part of the confusion of just how everything came in, unfortunately.
So a medic responded for the deceased from the back seat?
Yes.
Or presumed deceased, and a medic responded for Mr. Mitchell as well, right? If you know.
I don't recall.
Okay.
I couldn't see in the video if another medic had showed up or not. We might have had the road shut off, so they might have walked in. I'm not sure.
And while you were standing guard, you said there was a gun there?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember any other items of potential evidence on the ground?
I remember, I believe there's a cell phone on the ground as well. And then there was a knife on the interior of the car.
Your Honor, if I may approach, I'd like to show a few photographs.
You may.
Actually, not approaching, I'm sorry. If I could get cart forward. I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit H20, if we could see H20 there. Cone number 1, there appears what to be a weapon. Is that the gun you were standing guard by?
Yes, ma'am.
And by cone number 2, can you see what appears to be a cell phone?
Yes, ma'am.
You saw that there as well that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Showing you States Exhibit H25, and I'll get a close-up view after this. What are we looking at there?
So I believe, I can't tell what the larger black object is just because of the green, but it looks like a knife and then one of our U10 100 arrest summary forms.
All right, let's see if H26 helps. If not, I'll approach you with the hard copy. States Exhibit H26, and some of it I think is the lighting.
Yeah, I'd have to guess on that, sorry.
If I may approach, let me help. Let's see. Still not as clear.
Yeah. But I would guess it's a holster, if I had to guess. But I can't, just from the graininess of maybe the monitor or the picture, I'm not 100% sure.
And was anything disturbed on that seat by you or anyone in your presence?
No.
So this is how it looked when you were there that day?
Yeah, when I got there that day, from what I recall, that's what it basically said right there.
And I just approached him with a hard copy just to verify the black object.
Bing.
I'll show you a clearer photo here. Can you make out the black object now on States?
Yeah, that's a lot easier. Yeah, it's that gun holster.
Gun holster? You were interviewed that day or shortly thereafter by detectives, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed you have a CPD badge on. Is that the official CPD badge you're wearing on your left side there?
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further, thank you.
Any cross-examination?
May I proceed?
May.
Good morning, Officer McDaniel.
Morning.
My name is Caitlin Stevens, and I, along with my co-counsel, represent Mr. Mitchell in this action. If I go too fast or you don't understand my question, please just let me know and I'll rephrase and definitely slow down. Thank you so much for your service to our community as a police officer. You said you've been doing this for 14 years?
Yes, ma'am.
And during your tenure as an officer, you've had to arrest people many times, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in order to make an arrest, you have to have probable cause, or the elements, in order to charge somebody, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, once you determine that you do in fact have probable cause and you determine to arrest them, you've come into contact with many different types of people in terms of compliance, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Some are very compliant.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. Others not so much.
Yes, ma'am.
And as far as your training goes, Officer McDaniels, you start from a premise of proceeding with caution, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You start from the premise that some arrestees very well may not be compliant, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because you're trained to expect the unexpected. Now, in your dealings with people being arrested, I'm sure there's a difference between compliance with a sober person versus an intoxicated person, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There's a difference between somebody who's sober versus someone on drugs, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you would agree with me that when people are in fact under the influence of drugs or alcohol, their behavior is probably more unpredictable, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, depending on the level of compliance or lack thereof, you may have to use some force to effectuate that arrest, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're allowed to do that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, hypothetically, officer, if you go to arrest someone and tell them you're going to arrest them and place them in handcuffs for your safety, and they tell you, no, I'm not going in handcuffs, what does that mean to you?
They're starting down the line of noncompliance.
Starting down the line of noncompliance, certainly a sign of noncompliance,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, following up on that hypothetical, officer, when you try to go and cuff that person, and that person tells you, get your hands off of me, and starts putting up a fight, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that indicates to you.
So at that point, they're highly noncompliant, and unfortunately, that's when our uses of force tend to happen, is when people start to pull away or say the verbal of, I'm not going to go with the program, so to speak. So at that point, you got to be more proactive than reactive, because it's for my safety to get that person in handcuffs and their safety, because, you know, if I've had it unfortunately multiple times where I go to use force on somebody and I injure them. You know, I don't plan on that, but it happens, because I'm proactively saying, okay, this person's not going to go in handcuffs. I have to then get control of their arms the best way I can, hold their wrists, and then place them in handcuffs, which is very difficult to do if you have a feisty person fighting you. It's not an easy, even a big guy like me, it's, you know, it still tends to be difficult with somebody is fighting you to get you in handcuffs. So that's when injuries can occur to them and to me. And it happens a lot, unfortunately.
Thank you, officer. You said certainly a high non-compliance at that point, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Also a danger cue, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you're trained on the use of force continuum, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you make threat assessments on suspects all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
That use of force continuum starts at 0 and goes all the way to 8.
Yes, ma'am.
And in analyzing that use of force continuum, it can go from 0 to 8 in a matter of seconds, correct?
Oh, in milliseconds.
Thank you, officer. I want to switch gears and take you back to August 23rd, 2018. You mentioned that you received a 10-3 call, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, somebody can text you a 10-3 call, right?
Yeah, they can, yeah.
And fair to say, in the capacity of an undercover officer working the beat may not have access to a radio or walkie-talkie.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Now, you pull up to 365 South Yale, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Get out of your cruiser, And when you first pull up, I think your body-worn camera shows that you saw my client sitting outside up against the opened driver's side door, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You also saw a cell phone.
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't touch the cell phone, right?
No.
You also saw the firearm.
Yes, ma'am.
Both were on the ground.
Yes.
And a tourniquet was being placed on my client, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why a tourniquet was being placed on my client?
So most of the time, when a tourniquet is being applied, it's uncontrolled bleeding is what's occurring. We might not have, so unfortunately, some of our kits for first aid are not the best. You know, they might just give us Band-Aids, which is an issue, but not for here. But for the tourniquets, it's uncontrolled bleeding. You can't get that bleeding to stop in a hand or extremity or whatnot. So.
Now, initially, you saw Mr. Mitchell, but then your attention was drawn to the back seat of the vehicle, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't know if the person was alive or deceased. She appeared deceased, but you weren't for sure.
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You didn't know if she had a weapon on her.
Yes, I did not know.
You were able to assess whether or not she was a threat, correct?
Correct.
And you had no idea what allegedly occurred, correct?
Correct.
Now, I think your body-worn camera was about 9 minutes, right?
The timeline's about 11 minutes, 50-some seconds. So.
11 minutes. Thank you, officer. And during that 11 minutes, your focus was on the back seat, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And like I said, officer, you had no idea whether or not what had occurred.
Yeah, at that point, I had no clue what had happened.
Now, you opened up the back passenger side door, as shown on your body-worn camera, with no issues, right?
Correct.
You didn't have to unlock it.
Nope.
And you said there were 2 civilians on the scene, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And they were in the process of being interviewed, but placed in separate vehicles, right?
They're being placed in the cruisers for later interview.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you, officer. May I have states H26? Oh, I'm so sorry. Probably should have told you that before. I'm here to serve. Thank you, Mr. Cave. Thank you so much. May I have the Elmo, Your Honor?
Ask Melissa from here on out.
Thank you, Melissa.
You don't want me dealing with electronics.
Okay. Officer McDaniel, you identified that to Miss Pritchard as a U-10-100, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Those U-10-100s are only available to police officers, correct?
I believe they're a public forum, but I'm not 100%. But
So-
we mainly use them. I've never seen a civilian try to use them.
You've never seen a civilian try to use them. As a civilian, I can't go to the courthouse and say, give me a stack of CPD U-10-100s, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Now, you don't want civilians to be able to use those in order to be
Right.
out in the street impersonating police officers, correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as complaints go, Officer McDaniels, CPD only has access to complaints, right?
Yeah, mainly, yeah.
Thank you. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
May?
Officers, you actually have discretion when you arrest somebody, whether or not to summon somebody into court or take them into custody on a misdemeanor, correct?
For on-view arrest?
Correct, for a misdemeanor.
Yes, ma'am.
But back in 2018, if that person had a warrant, you did not have the discretion on whether or not to serve them with a summons or take them into custody, correct?
Correct, yeah.
You had to take them into custody,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
officer, you do have that nice shiny badge on. Is it common for undercover officers to display their nice shiny badge or wear it on their uniform or their plain clothes?
No, ma'am. It'd be obvious that they're not, it'd be obvious that they would be a police officer at that point.
And that would be indicative of being a police officer, so that would alert the potential suspect that they
That you're
are.
undercover,
Correct.
so to speak.
Thank you, Officer McDaniel, I appreciate it. I have no further questions at this time.
May redirect?
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer McDaniel, have you ever worked vice or undercover?
No, ma'am.
All right. So you always work on the street in a uniform with a badge.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it important as an officer that civilians you're dealing with recognize that you're an officer?
Yes.
Before you go to arrest someone, do you want them to be sure that they're comfortable that you are in fact law enforcement?
Yes. Yeah.
Not working undercover, do you ever encounter those difficulties where someone says, I don't believe you, I don't prove who you are?
Unfortunately, yeah, people try to say that, but obviously I'm always in the uniform of the day. So I explain to them, listen, I've had people try to be deceptive in that kind of way, but most of the time people are like, you're a police officer, I'll comply.
When you get in a situation, do you have your walkie? Do you call for backup? What do you do?
If I have somebody that turns non-compliant, in my case, I get on my radio. I'll even do it if I see the body language of somebody that I can tell they're being deceptive or, being deceptive physically or verbally. I'll call for backup before I even try to, go hands-on, so to speak, and try to talk to the person and gain most compliant that I can to get them in handcuffs.
So,
Without
I
use
guess-
of force, but it depends on the level of compliance of the person.
very good. But you're saying before you go hands-on, you'll try to call for some backup or prove yourself.
Right, yeah, right.
When you're dealing with somebody who's a threat or a potential threat, do you have a duty to constantly reassess that threat and that threat level?
Yeah, you are the entire time, because the person can go from compliant to non-compliant quickly, but if you gain control of the situation or they're, like say they're resisting, so to speak, because the way they train us is, handcuff on contact, basically, the second I touch their hands, I gotta try to get them in handcuffs, because if I don't, it's very likely, and it happens all the time, where just me touching their body, they tense up, and when a person's body tenses up, that's when you know, in my experience, that they're beginning to fight, so to speak. So you kind of gotta cuff quickly and when they're not being compliant, or where there's the potential of non-compliance.
Let me take you back a step too.
Okay.
If a civilian says, call the police, I don't think you're the police, do you get some assistance before you put your hands on them?
Not normally, no. Just because, for me, I'm in the uniform of the day. There's not a whole lot I have to prove beyond I'm wearing the police uniform with the police badge. So at that point, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm here for whatever reason, and try to reason with the person, so to speak. But I won't call for backup immediately after if that's the case.
But that's when you're
But
dressed like
that's
this
in
uniform.
my uniform, yes, ma'am.
Discussing the door opening easily here. When the doors are child locked from the inside, like the back of the cruiser.
Leading speculation.
Oh,
He said the door
you
opened.
want to approach?
He has no idea.
Approach, don't speak in the courtroom.
You said it, child. You want to
It'll be overruled. He can answer if he knows.
Thank you. Let's focus on a cruiser. When you have your cruiser child locks activated, can somebody open from the inside?
So in our cruisers, they're built basically to not be able to open the doors. So I guess there are child locks, so to speak. So yeah, they can't open them from the inside out.
Okay, my terms, I guess. I'm calling it child
Right,
lock.
yeah.
But you can open that from the outside.
I can open from the outside. They're unable to open from the inside.
There was discussion about U-10-100s and what documents are available to the public. Is it your testimony you're not sure if those are documents you can get off the internet or through the courthouse?
Yeah, I'm not sure if those are public record or not, where I could go online and download it, so to speak. I've never tried, I guess. So, could somebody get one if they tried hard enough? I'm sure they could, yeah.
Are there copies of complaints and things that get loaded into the court system and things that are available to the public? If you know.
I don't know, no.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Any questions as a result of those?
Officer McDaniel, you've had experience even dressed up as a police officer where people try to tell you you're not a police officer, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you talked about with Miss Pritchard the ability to cuff somebody quickly, correct?
Attempt to, yeah.
And you need to be able to cuff somebody quickly in order for that person's safety, correct?
Yeah, theirs and mine.
But also your safety, right? And so you want to make sure that you don't get hurt, correct? You want to make sure that that person can't introduce a knife and slice you, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, officer. I have no further questions.
All right, Officer McDaniel, you can step down. Thank you.
Make sure.
Any further witnesses on behalf of the state?
Just before we bring our next live witness, we have a stipulation, thanks, to read into the record.
You may.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Judge, this document that I'm holding is marked Stipulation of the Parties, State of Ohio versus Andrew Mitchell, 19 CR 1662, and it is marked as Joint Exhibit 1. If called to testify, the parties agree that Detective James Howe of the Columbus Division of Police would testify that he is an expert in cellular phone extraction and analysis. Detective Howe analyzed a Samsung mobile phone on August the 27th, 2018, belonging to Andrew Mitchell. Detective Howe would testify that he was able to extract some text messages sent and received by Mr. Mitchell's cellular phone on the morning of August 23rd, 2018. He would further testify that he prepared a written report based upon his examination. The parties stipulate the qualifications, findings, and the admission of the extraction report by Detective James Howe. The extraction report is marked as State's Exhibit Q. With that, Judge, I would like to call Officer Laura Evans to the stand.
Does you so stipulate?
So stipulated, Your Honor. Yes, sir.
And if the jury didn't remember, Ed instructed you yesterday that their attorneys agree to any fact. Such agreement, stipulation, or omission of fact will be brought to your attention, and you may then regard such fact as being conclusively proved without the necessity of further evidence of such fact. There's a little maze around here. Officer, can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear, affirm under penalty of perjury, your testimony in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Have a seat. Pull yourself up close to the microphone, and you may inquire.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Morning.
Can you tell us who you are and what you do for a living?
I am Detective Laura Evans. I am a police officer with the City of Columbus, a detective in the Narcotics Bureau.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up.
Okay.
Is that microphone working, Judge, for the?
You tap on it? Yes.
Yes.
How long have you been a police officer with Columbus?
It'll be 30 years in July.
Okay. And what do you do specifically for Columbus Police?
I'm a narcotics detective. I mainly handle the abatements now.
Abatements?
Yes.
Okay. What were you doing for Columbus Police back in August of 2018?
I was working with the Vice Bureau.
Okay. You know why we're here today, right? What we're going
Yes.
to talk about. Okay. Can you tell us generally some of the duties that you had working with Vice back then?
I would do a reverse decoy operation, normally playing a prostitute to arrest Johns. I also did underage buys for alcohol or cigarettes or things like that with using a underage CI to do abatements on the businesses and bars and things of that sort for alcohol violations. And I would assist the male detectives when they were out picking up prostitutes also. I would search the females normally when they were done before they would go to jail or be arrested.
Okay, so if an arrest was made of a female, would they bring them to you to search?
Yes.
Okay, and that's division policy? that
Well,
you're
I
aware
can
of?
go to them or they can bring them to me, yes.
But if it's a female, they want another female searching?
Correct. If it's not serious circumstances, yes.
Right, okay, okay. And is that generally what you were doing that day back in August?
Yes.
Okay. Were you working with Andrew Mitchell on that day?
Yes, I was.
How long have you known Andrew Mitchell?
I think he was only with the Vice Bureau a couple years before that, but I've known him since I've been on, pretty much. I think he's been on longer than me, so.
So the whole time you've been?
I mean, not personally close, but I've known of him, yes.
Okay. Do you see him here in the courtroom this morning?
Yes, I do.
Judge, can you please point him out?
Yeah, we would stipulate to both ID and venue.
Okay. Venue means this happened in Franklin County, right?
Yes.
Okay. You said you've known him for a while. Are you friends with Andrew?
I would consider him a friend, yes.
Okay. And have you talked to him since this all happened?
Since the day it happened,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. In what capacity?
I was actually there right after it happened.
Okay. Okay. I mean, after, and I know we'll get to you. You went to the hospital to see him afterwards,
Yes.
right? But since that period of time, have you talked to him about this?
No.
You haven't talked to him about testifying or anything like that?
No.
Okay. You considered him a friend?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. I know this is tough, isn't it? Okay. You need to say, I'm sorry. She's taking this down, so you need to say yes or no instead of just nodding your head.
Okay, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. And I apologize for putting you up here, but you understand why we're doing what we have to do.
I do.
Okay. Let's go back to, before we get into the actual day, when you are in one of these days where they're out picking up women and you're processing, searching, or whatever it is you're doing, can you kind of walk me through the procedure for that? How does that get set up and how do they eventually come to you?
They usually decide on a location where I'm going to be, depending upon what area they're working. So I will normally just post up and wait for them. Then they are looking around. They'll just drive around. They'll be looking for someone to pick up. And normally they will see somebody. They will let us know that they are looking at that person so that another detective doesn't come up and try the same, at the same time or anything. Then they try to, I want to say, decop their vehicle, make sure they don't have anything visible for her to see, and get their recorder set. And then they normally pick them up and get the elements of what they need. And then they are told to, as soon as they've gotten the elements, they want to get handcuffs on because they have a tendency to run or, try to do something to get away. So they will pull up to like a pole or whatever they can find on the passenger side or wherever they're at. Child locks are also usually on the vehicle, almost always left on because they forget sometimes if I'm in the back seat to let me out.
Okay.
But they pull up to a pole to stop them from being able to run out of the vehicle or hop in the back seat and take off. And they usually place the cuffs on at that point. And then they will bring her to me wherever I'm at, and I will search her and go through her purse and things like that before initiate to arrest.
And then do you take her do you usually take them to jail at that point? Do you summons them? How do you?
It depends on if they have warrants, they're going to have to go to jail, and we usually call for a cruiser for that. So the cruiser will come and meet us at that location, usually where I've searched her at, and then they will take her to jail. If it's not, it's just a summons normally.
Okay, and you let them go and give them a court date?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned a couple things, that they pull up next to a door or a pole or something, and that's standard procedure in these kind of cases?
Yes.
And you mentioned child locks. I'm going to make an assumption here from what I know of child locks, but you tell me if I'm wrong. That means you can't get out from inside, but you can open it from the outside.
Correct.
And to your knowledge, your cars, the undercover cars used were equipped with those child locks?
Yes.
You mentioned that they, and again, I'm trying to get this in my head, they see somebody they think they're going to pick up and then move away to do these other things?
Yeah, they'll usually drive around the block or something and to where she can't see them and make sure everything's set up before they allow her in the vehicle.
And you mentioned start a recording. What's that mean?
That means any kind of recording device that they have, there's different ones they can use, but it's usually a phone or some sort to be able to record the conversation that's going on in the vehicle.
And is that so that you can prove in court later the elements of whatever it is you're going to charge?
Yes.
Okay. And you say a phone, so a cell phone normally?
Normally, I think there's a few other devices, but I think the normal use was a cell phone because it just looks less suspicious.
Okay. Is it procedure normally to have a firearm close at hand, though?
Depends upon the circumstances. I mean, these girls will search the vehicle looking for stuff, so you can't really have too much too close to you or they're going to find it and they're going to know.
Okay. Now, let's go specifically, okay, I'm sorry, one more thing. Do you carry a badge in these situations?
Not always.
Okay.
No.
And again, I see you're wearing one now, and that's your standard, I guess we'll call it the shiny badge, the standard Columbus Police badge, is that right?
Yes.
Is there other identification that you carry aside
Yes.
from that badge? What is that?
It's an ID card. Probably depends on what you have. Mine is actually located inside so that I have it to be able to get into doors and things like that I need to get into.
So like a key card?
Yes.
Okay, can you pull that out and just show what we're talking about? And that's another form of identification for you?
Yes.
And also works as a key card?
Yes.
And Judge, for the record, she pulled that, what looks to be a standard ID key card out of her badge case, I guess, for what it's worth, and is producing it for the jury. Thank you. Let's go specifically to August the 23rd. What part of town were you working?
On the west side?
And is that the area we commonly call Hilltop Bottoms, that kind of place?
Yes.
Okay. And do you work there often?
Yes.
Okay. When you mentioned there were areas or places that you would have them bring to you, what were your designated places that day in August up on the Hilltop?
Hilltop was the library, about Hague.
I'm sorry?
I think it's about Hague, I think is the cross.
I can't hear.
I'm sorry, about Hague and Sullivan, I think was the cross, yeah.
Okay. So the Hilltop Library.
Yes.
Was there any other place out there that you would use?
Yes. For the bottoms, it's sometimes the Princeton Club on Union Street.
So generally one of those two places is what you're using?
Yes, they're parking lots.
I'm sorry. And when you all go out, do you tell them ahead of time which one you're going to be at, or do they text you and say, where are you?
Both. So if we try to designate it, but obviously if they end up, on the bottoms, I'm going to go down there. So it depends on where they're at.
Okay. And they're going to come to you, though, right?
That's the way we normally do it, but yes, I do go to them if they need so. I will go to them.
Okay. And are you in a cruiser or are you in an unmarked car?
Unmarked car.
Okay. All right, I want to go back a little the morning of the 23rd, because you guys didn't start out on the west side together, did you?
No.
What'd you start doing the morning of the 23rd?
We had firearms qualifications.
Firearm qualifications or training, or both?
It was qualifications.
Qualifications, okay. How often do you do that?
About 4 or 5 times a year, I believe.
Okay. And who did you go to firearms qualifications with that morning?
I believe it was an entire team.
Okay, when you say entire team, is Andy Mitchell part of that team?
Yes.
And approximately how many other folks are on that team?
5, I think, on that day.
Okay. And where is physically the firearms training that you go to?
It's on McKinley Avenue, the old academy.
And what time did y'all go out there that morning?
Not really sure. I believe it was noon. Not positive, though.
Okay. How long does it take?
I think that course took about a half hour at the most.
Okay.
Maybe an hour with cleaning your gun.
I believe when the event happened that we're going to talk about, I believe that was I think the call came in around 11:30 in the morning.
Okay.
Does that change when you
That
think?
probably was a 9 o'clock then. We have it like starts at like 7, I think, in the morning, then they have like a couple hours later, there's another set, and there's another set, and it keeps going throughout the day, so I normally go at noon, but on that day, I'm not positive which time we went.
And that's not so much important as this. Was it before the event happened?
Yes.
Okay, so you're out there doing your training. How long does it take?
It depends on the course, but that one, I'm not sure how long it took, but at least a half an hour and maybe, half an hour to clean your gun.
Okay. And then did you decide at that point where you guys were going to head out to work, or had that already been predetermined?
No, we were deciding whether to go get some lunch or whether to go out and work, and I believe we decided to work.
Okay. And so when you say we decided to work, what's that mean physically the folks in your team do?
Normally the guys will be picking up the female prostitutes. That's usually the way it occurs, even if I'm working. They will kind of clean the street before I go out, so.
Okay. Okay. But they stay generally in one area, like the west side?
Yes.
Okay. What was your first interaction as it relates to picking someone up that morning?
What do you mean, my first?
Was this the first thing that happened to you? Were you doing something else?
Oh, no. Daryl McKissick, the detective that's passed away recently, he had picked up a female prostitute also. And he was waiting for her haul after I had searched her when I guess the text message came in from Andy, and he had advised me that I think Andy's got one, if you can go to him. And I said, are you okay? Because he had to wait on the cruiser to get there to take his to jail because she had warrants also.
Okay, you're using pronouns, and
Okay.
I'm
sorry.
I want to make sure I got this straight. You say he's waiting on a cruiser. Who are you talking about?
Daryl McKissick, Detective Daryl McKissick.
So Detective McKissick has picked up a girl
Yes.
and brought her to you?
Yes, and I had searched her on the library lot.
Okay. And so now you're waiting in this case, you guys were going to arrest her?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're waiting on a cruiser?
Yes.
And is that when you got the text from Andy?
Yes.
Okay. Did these texts and this notification make it such that you left Detective McKissick before a cruiser got there?
Yes.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
Okay.
I'm going to show you what's been marked State's Exhibit Q. Specifically, we're going to start at the back page, which is earlier in time, and move up.
Okay.
And I guess if you want to just take a look at that generally, have you seen this document before?
Something like this, yes.
What is that document?
It's a copy of the text messages, apparently, that were sent to each officer, it looks like, or detective.
Keep your voice up.
I'm sorry, okay. I'm sorry, I speak slow.
And so these represented the text message that you sent and or received from Mr. Mitchell that morning?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to, Judge, if I may publish these.
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Yes, I may have the Elmo. Detective Evans, this is about a 3-page report. In the back 2 pages appear to be the text, and they go backwards. So I'm going to start in time with the end.
Okay.
And if we look here on the screen is entries 5, 6, and 7. And like I said, I want to start at number 7. And can you tell us what time in the morning that one got sent out, what the timestamp says?
It says 11:01,
Okay.
51.
And it is sent to, and as we've already stipulated, you weren't in the room, but we've stipulated these are Andrew Mitchell's texts from his phone.
Okay.
So you can work that assumption. And at the bottom it says which direction is he sending this? Is this outgoing from his phone or incoming?
It says outgoing.
Okay. And what does he text at 11:01?
Anybody out here?
Okay. Then we go to the next text. Can you tell us the time that the next text is sent?
11:20.
Okay. So that's approximately 19 minutes later. So do you, from that context, do you remember what he's trying to accomplish when he texts anybody out here?
He's probably looking at one that he's noticed and he wants to try it, but he wants to make sure that we're there.
Okay. Is that standard? They'll text you before they even pick the girl up?
Yes.
Okay. So he's just making sure things are in order. That's what that means to you?
Yeah, a lot of times they, like I said, you don't want the other detective to go picking up the same girl also.
Okay. Okay. So then at 11:20, it appears from what I can tell here, this is a text from you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what do you tell him?
I tell him, yep, D is at the library with one,
And who is D?
Daryl McKissick.
Okay. This is the detective you're talking about that you were with the library?
Yes.
Then we move to the next one, and what time is that?
That is 11:21.
Okay, and again, is that coming from Andrew Mitchell?
Yes, outgoing, yes.
Okay, and he texts you?
Okay.
Okay. And continuing on our, now I'm putting up the page that shows entries 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we go to the next one, which was 4, what time is that sent?
11:31.
Okay, and again, from Andrew Mitchell?
Yes.
And again, are you on the list of people there that would have received this?
Yes.
And what's he texted at 11:31?
Somebody come to take and bellows, please.
What did you make of that?
I didn't understand the take. I assumed he was talking to his phone, like a talk to text version, but I just was trying to think of what street rhymed with take and I couldn't get it, and Daryl didn't know, and we really didn't know where he was at.
Okay, so is that safe to assume there's no Take Street in the bottoms?
True.
Okay. Let's go on then. It looks like just a matter of less than a minute later, number 3, what time is that sent?
11:31.
And is that also coming from Andrew Mitchell?
Yes.
And are you also one of the recipients?
Yes.
And what's he tell us there? What's he trying to tell you there?
Grays.
Do you have any idea what that meant?
No.
At the time when you got this, what did that tell you?
I didn't know where he was at.
Did you take any action at all at this point?
Yes, I started driving towards an area that another detective had previously gotten into a fight with one of the prostitutes. This seemed to be like a weekly occurrence almost.
Okay.
And just in case, that he needed some help or,
Okay.
with what was going on, but I was assuming he was down that way,
And when you say down that way, what direction?
down toward the bottoms from the hilltop.
Okay. And if we're in Columbus and we're leaving from the library to the bottoms, to the Yale, what turns out to be the Yale Street,
Mhm.
or Yale Avenue, which direction are you headed?
I'm headed east,
East, and where you're going down what road?
Sullivan.
Okay. Approximately how long of a drive is it from the library up on the hilltop down to Yale, or in the general direction you were trying to go at the bottoms?
I mean, it depends on traffic, 5 maybe, but you're stuck a lot. There's a lot of lights and a lot of traffic, so
When you say 5, are we talking minutes?
yes.
All right, so you don't know exactly what graz means or graze. When we go to the next one, which is sent, it looks like a couple minutes, a minute and a second later. Number 2, when was that sent?
That was 11:33.
Okay, and again, is this from Andrew Mitchell's phone?
Yes.
And again, are you one of the recipients?
Yes.
And what did he send to you at that point?
Bellows and Yale doesn't believe I'm a cop.
Okay, do you recall where you were physically when you received that?
I believe I was driving at that time, so I did not see this message
Okay.
to be able to respond. And at some point in time, I seen cruisers blowing by me.
Okay, so
Red light and siren.
you don't remember actually getting entry number 2?
No.
Okay, and so tell me about that. You see cruisers blowing by you?
Yes.
And does that mean they're also going eastbound on Sullivan?
Yes.
And what's your impression of that? What do you think?
I mean, it can't be anything. It can be any other emergency they're running on. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I hope it's not, something to do with him, but I didn't know at that point.
Okay. Did you follow the cruisers?
I tried, but in a plane car, I can't.
Why not?
Huh?
Why not?
Because I don't have lights and sirens or anything on my vehicle to do that.
So are you still stopping at red lights and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to do my best to probably violate a few rules, but I unfortunately still can't run it like they are.
Okay. Did you lose sight of the cruisers at any point?
Yes.
Where was that?
I am not sure because they had turned off before I was able to get out and around
Okay.
other cars.
There's another text, it looks like, sent similarly to you, entry number 1. You you continue to tell us what time that was?
That was 11:35.
Okay. And is that one again from Andrew Mitchell to, amongst others, you?
Yes.
And what's that?
It says 10-3.
What does 10-3 mean?
That means an officer in trouble.
Okay. If you didn't get number 2, do you remember getting number 1?
No,
Okay.
not till afterwards, put it that way.
Okay. You looked at your phone later, right?
Yes.
Okay. But at the time,
I was trying to look for cruisers.
your knowledge of what's going on, is it safe to say ends here at number 3 at
Yes.
11:31? Okay. Thanks, Melissa. So you've lost sight of the cruisers, what are you doing?
I'm still driving toward that area, which was, I'm not sure the street, Glenwood, I want to say, but there was an alley that has a brick wall where, like I said, Detective Jim Mathias had just been in or Mathis had been in a fight the previous week and had to use mace on one of the prostitutes. So I was still heading for that area, but looking for the cruisers down each street, and I didn't see any. Apparently I had bypassed the street also. I still didn't know where I was supposed to go, and then I made a loop around, and then I realized I saw cruisers.
Okay. And I don't want to get too much into this other thing that happened a week before necessarily. But you're saying that was another detective?
There was another detective the previous week.
Yeah, that got in trouble.
That got into a fight, yes, with another prostitute.
Okay, but that wasn't Andrew Mitchell?
No,
Okay, and it wasn't Daryl McKissick?
no,
Okay, so some other one that you had worked a week ago had a problem in that area?
yes.
Okay. Do you eventually get to Bellows and Yale?
Yes.
Okay, how does that happen?
When I pulled around, I did see the cruisers. When I made a lap around the block, I seen the cruisers, and one of the cruisers was putting up scene tape across the scene. I did not see him at that point, but I went ahead and pulled up, and that's when I noticed Andy standing there.
Okay. What did you see when you first saw Andy and saw the whole thing going on?
He was at the back of the K-9 cruiser, kind of sitting on the edge there a little bit, and blood running down his arm pretty good,
Okay.
where he had been cut.
Appeared to be injured to you?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any other folks there?
There were other police officers. I believe I was the only detective at the time outside of Andy.
Okay. So it's safe to say you weren't first on the scene?
No.
Okay. Were there other civilians?
I don't recall seeing any other civilians other than on the street on the other side of the scene tape, put it that way.
And what did they appear to be to you?
What did they appear to be, or just citizens that lived there?
Okay. Did you see a tourniquet put on Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, I was there assisting.
So were you helping him at that point?
Yeah, I think I took his, Andy's bracelet that he had on and took it off of him. We put it inside one of his gloves because it was covered in blood, and then placed the tourniquet on him.
Why did you take the bracelet?
It was just covered in blood and probably needed to get it off anyway.
Did he ask you to do that?
Yes.
Okay. What did you do then?
Just waited for EMS and everybody else to kind of handle everything they needed to handle because we were worried about him at that point and getting lightheaded from, there was a lot of blood.
Okay. Did you have any real conversation with him at that point?
Other than I think I didn't even realize she was still in the car at that point. And then he advised me what had happened. And I think I walked over to the car. I didn't see her in the car, but I didn't go up far enough. I think I remember seeing his phone on the ground, and I noticed one of his tires was flat. It was parked up against the wall or the corner of the wall. And I don't recall seeing her at all until the medics were taking her out of the vehicle. So I didn't even know there was a shooting. I just kind of assumed she ran like the rest of them do. They run, they take off, and after he's done something to her, I didn't even know at that point that she had been shot.
Okay. And did you look at her for any given period of time?
When they pulled her out of the vehicle, yes.
Could you identify her at all? Did you know her?
I mean, I think I had seen her before, but I could not identify her.
Okay. Were you looking at her to make any assessments about whether she was the one that had been involved with Detective Mathis the week prior?
I think she was, it was a possibility she was involved, but I cannot for certain say it was her involved with it. And we had an accusation of some robberies going on by the prostitutes that were taking the Johns, we call them, the males, to a certain location and trying to rob them,
Right.
at that point. So,
But you couldn't.
the description matches, but you can never be for certain that it is.
Yeah, okay. But you don't think you'd ever had contact with her?
I don't know. I probably have if she's been arrested, but I really cannot say for sure.
Right.
No.
Right, okay. How long were you at the scene there?
Kind of lost track of time, but I'm not really sure.
Were you there when the defendant was taken off to the hospital?
Yes.
Okay, and did you end up going to the hospital?
Yes, I had to make a pit stop. Andy had wanted something to drink, and I think the lieutenant had given me some money to get some Powerade or something that he had requested.
Okay.
So I was stopping at the store before I went to the hospital.
Okay, so you stopped to get him some Powerade?
Yeah.
And then went on to the hospital. Which hospital was he at?
Downtown Grant, I believe.
Grant?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you got there, were there other officers there as well?
Yes.
The whole team show up?
Yes.
Okay. And it was there, were you there to find out about the case or there just to support?
Just to support. I don't think I got to see Andy either. He was being taken off to surgery before I had arrived.
Okay. And after that day, you haven't talked to him about this case or anything?
No.
Okay. I appreciate your time. Thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute break now. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on the case until it is finally submitted to you.
All rise.
Everyone can have a seat. You can step down if you want. 15-minute break.
And we have time now. You want to
really lock that?
Right. What's your point? That's what's crazy.
saying is Eastern Kentucky is playing back-to-back Kentucky and Demeanor.
My daughter graduated from Kentucky. Well, I love it. Actually, yeah, Luke wore one of those. Okay.
We have one next door, two upstairs.
Okay.
All rise.
Can I have a seat? What? Yeah. Everyone can have a seat. This is for the cameraman. It's come to our attention. We got a call from Pennsylvania that was viewing the live stream in this matter. And you can apparently see the prosecutors, their laptops, and also when you zoomed in on the prosecutor's hand, they were televising his notes that were at that. So
I tried to be careful with that. It was out of focus. So the hand was focused, but directly beyond his hand, the paper was out of focus. I can refrain from doing so.
if you can prevent from doing the actual notes, because if I'm getting a call from Pennsylvania,
That's okay. I'm sorry about that.
I don't know why people want to watch this drug.
Have them call me.
Dan, I'll give you his number so you guys can. Do we need to put anything on the record? All right, let's go get the jury.
All rise.
Everyone can have a seat. Detective, you're still under oath.
Yes, sir.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, may I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Detective.
Morning.
My name is Mark Collins. We've known each other, correct?
Yes.
Myself and Ms. Stevens represent Mr. Mitchell. I'm going to just have a series of some conceptual questions for you. If I go too fast or you don't understand, please ask me to rephrase, okay?
Okay.
A little birdie told me it was your birthday on Monday, correct?
It was, yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
You've been on the force, I believe, close to 30 years?
Yes.
Be 30 years in July.
Yes.
All right. What's the plans after that?
I actually just got the golden ticket, so looks like I'm going to be retiring soon.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for your service. So, and by the golden ticket, you mean some of the buyouts?
The buyout, yes.
Correct. Detective, over those 30 years, I'm sure you've had multiple assignments through the Division of Police, correct?
Yes.
Can you walk the ladies and gentlemen through some of those assignments?
Initially, everybody starts on patrol, so that's where I started. I spent most of my career on patrol, 21 years, before I decided to take a burglary job inside the headquarters building. And I did that job for about 8 months, enough to get the 6 months experience minimum you need for most other jobs. And the opportunity came open for the Vice Bureau, which I had worked previously with them. From day one, I think when I first hit the street, I was actually being pulled to do these same type of operations that I did for permanent with the Vice job. So I did like it. I seen a lot of good things happen with it. I mean, there's a lot of good things that go on outside of just being arrested. I mean, there was a lot of help given to every one of these victims. They were, when it comes to housing, to money, to help to get off drugs, to food and shelter, and think whatever they needed. It inspired me a little bit. I think when I first became a cop, I wanted to possibly get into social work. So this was kind of an in-between, you know, and I liked that job. So I stayed there until it was abolished. So
it's not just, hey, lock someone up and you're done. The Vice Unit actually had participation and tried to help people.
Yes, we did. We worked with a lot of the local churches, and like I said, it was actually a job, and once in my career I really did enjoy.
21 years on patrol, I take it you've come into contact with lots of different types of suspects, correct?
Yes.
And when you approach someone in a vehicle, or you approach someone on the street in your eyesight, what goes through your mind, or what goes through your checklist at that point in time, Detective?
Well, safety is always our first concern when you're approaching anybody. So that's probably the biggest thing you look at before I can't think of much else. I'm not sure what you're asking.
You're trained to try to expect the unexpected, correct?
Oh, yes.
You're trained to observe clues, you're trained to observe actions, body actions, demeanor, voice, correct?
I've seen a bunch of videos, and we've, seen the good, the bad, the ugly.
Absolutely, and that happens over your 30-year career, correct?
Yes.
And it's fair to say some people you've come into contact with, once you have the legal elements for an arrest, you then have to take them into custody, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And some people are very compliant, correct?
Oh, yes.
Other people are non-compliant, correct?
Yes.
Is it fair to say people who are impaired either on alcohol or drugs are usually more non-compliant than others?
Yes.
Okay. And you've seen the range probably, right? People who are happy drunks, so to speak, versus people who are belligerent drunks.
Yes.
And with belligerent drunks, you have to try to anticipate what might happen, correct?
True.
Okay. It's more unexpected. It's more unpredictable, correct?
Yes.
People are whacked out on drugs or have a bunch of drugs in their system, they tend to react differently than sober people, correct?
Right.
They don't perceive what a sober person does, correct?
Right.
They don't, the stimulus that's there in the area, other things control their body at that point in time, correct?
Yes.
The drugs in their system, things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
Based on your 30 years, have you come into people, and specifically with vice, have you come into contact with people who are dope sick?
Yes.
What does dope sick mean for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
It means that they are probably getting to that point to where they have to get the substance in them to be normal, so to speak, for them. They don't have a choice. They really don't. Once they've started and they've gotten hooked on this, they know that the only way to get back to a normalcy is to get more of that in their system, and it just creates more and more that they need each time. But unfortunately, they have no control over their body movements half the time. They don't even know what they're doing at all sometimes.
Is it fair to say that they'll manipulate or say whatever in order to get
Yes.
more drugs?
They will.
Okay.
They do not want to go to jail because there's no drugs there for them.
And there's physical effects of being dope sick, correct?
Yes.
As well as mental and emotional effects?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a process that you've seen over your time in vice as well as patrol?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of just in general, on a misdemeanor detective, if you have the elements as an officer or detective, you can actually determine or have some ability to determine whether or not to give someone a citation or take someone to custody, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Why so?
Well, that was then, yes, but it's a discretion to how they, what is needed. Sometimes that's not needed, or, if they've got kids there or something else is involved. There's always some circumstances that might prevent you from taking them to jail, but then sometimes you are told that they must go to jail.
Absolutely. And back in 2018, if someone had a warrant, did you have any discretion whether or not to take an individual to jail for misdemeanor?
No.
And with a felony, on felonies, do you have discretion back in 2018 whether or not to take someone to jail?
No.
You have to take someone in custody when they have a felony, correct?
Yes.
So in theory, if someone committed a felonious assault on someone, that person has to go to jail. There is no way, shape, or form that they're staying out.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of felonies, you're aware of felonious assault is a felony of the second degree, correct?
Right.
Felonious assault on a police officer is a felony of the first degree, correct?
Right.
And a basic assault on a police officer where there's no physical harm caused is a felony of the fourth degree, correct?
Correct.
And the felonies basically go felony 1 down to felony 5.
Yes.
More severe, more violent. Felonious assault is a violent offense, correct?
Yes.
Serious physical harm is caused to someone, or an attempt to cause serious physical harm with a deadly weapon is done, correct?
Correct.
Okay. It's a violent offense, correct?
Yes.
Now, let's talk about some of your duties on vice. I heard you talk to Mr. Cable. It's kind of a reversal role, right, for a
Yes.
female detective?
Yes, it is.
How so, if you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
We normally call it a reversal, and what they would do is place me as a decoy, as a prostitute, and I am supposed to entice the Johns sometimes. I do have to change my look and my appearance and either walk the streets as they do. I do study them to see how they do it and walk just like them, or they place me in hotel rooms, whatever the operation actually calls for, but I'm supposed to be catching them for soliciting charges.
Okay. So in the vice unit, males go through the process as potential Johns, right?
Yes.
However, you're in the process of being a prostitute.
Yes.
Playing one, so to speak, correct? And in that situation, do you have your badge on you?
No.
Where do you keep your badge when you're playing the role?
It depends, but normally it's usually with the last officer that dropped me off wherever I'm at, or if it's in a hotel room, it stays with the sergeant in whatever room he's in.
You try to have as least amount of things as you as possible so that they can't identify you as a police officer, correct?
Correct. They do search.
What's the term cop test in the vice unit for
It's-
these situations?
It's basically that searching. They're either asking questions that will let them know whether I'm a cop or not, or they will be searching for things. Sometimes they've even patted me down, or, they try to look for anything that makes you look like a cop, especially if you're very clean. That's why I have to kind of dress the part. Nails don't get done, things of sorts, that I have to look like the part. But they test you quite often. They've asked me, where's your stem, meaning where's your crack pipe, because they know you smoke crack if you're out there, or you smoke something. And so I usually have something fake on me to show them it's them testing me.
And it's your understanding from your experience working with the male detectives that they get tested as well?
Yes.
In terms of a walkie-talkie, why would you not have a walkie-talkie close to you in those types of undercover situations, detective?
They would clearly just think you're a cop if you have one.
Okay. Walkie-talkies go off sometimes, correct?
Yes.
You can't control when someone calls the walkie-talkie, correct?
Right.
So if a prostitute gets into a vehicle and they see or hear something that reflects of a walkie-talkie, what happens then?
They're probably going to get out of the vehicle.
Okay, you're not going to get the elements, correct?
Right.
A gun has to be hidden, correct?
Yes.
The gun's not on them or anything like that, correct?
Probably not, yeah.
Okay. All right, and have you had situations when you've announced, hey, I'm the police, that they didn't believe you?
Yeah,
Why so?
because you don't look like one.
Right, okay. And in that situation, you're never alone in a car being a female posing as a prostitute, correct?
No.
Okay. You never get in close enough contact with that individual.
No, they're a little more protective, I think, of us.
Why so, detective?
I think because I think the officers, they're a little more protective of us. So when I'm out there working, I've got probably at least 5 sets of eyes on me. And a plan in place that if I were to be kidnapped and drug into a car, I'm supposed to get that seatbelt on because that car's getting hit. So,
And that's for you.
yes,
But when the males are posing as the Johns, they don't have that same protection or eyes on them, correct?
no,
And back in 2018, the policies put in place at that point in time allowed male detectives to be on their own in the vehicle.
yes,
And in that situation, the prostitute always gets in the vehicle with them,
right.
correct? And at that point in time, that's why the tape recording has already been turned on, or the process has been put in place, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in your role, you don't have that same physical type of contact or close interaction in a vehicle?
No, I don't.
Okay. And when you effectuate a charge or you write something up, you have to do an affidavit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is an affidavit for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
It's also called a complaint. It lists the actual charges, details about the person himself, name, date of birth, address, things of that sort, the officer's information, the actual charge of the crime, what happened, and the wording that goes into it is pretty much statutory on everything. We just fill in the blanks.
And those are provided only to you, police officers, correct?
Yes.
They're not provided to the general public or anything like that?
No.
We don't want people out there pretending to be police officers and using that type of information, correct?
Correct.
The same could be said of U-10-100s, correct?
Yes.
And the same could be said as that's why you also have a specific CPD ID, correct?
Yes.
That ID is made internally by CPD, correct?
Yes.
It has certain coding on it, correct?
Yes.
It has your picture on it, correct?
Yes.
And in that picture, it's not a picture of you in undercover, right? It's a picture of you actually in a Columbus Police Officer uniform, correct?
Or detective stuff, yes.
Or detective stuff. And your picture is?
Detective.
Okay, on there. All right. And that you're supposed to carry with you all the time, correct?
Yes.
Now, back in 2018, let me ask, are you aware of the operating procedures back in 2018 for the Vice Unit with regards to a badge?
Yes.
And that is, were you required to carry a badge at that point in time?
No.
Okay. So CPD and the powers to be actually put in the directives that you don't have to have your badge on you when you're doing undercover work, correct?
Correct.
So it's not uncommon for undercover officers to not have their badge and when they're trying to identify themselves, correct?
Correct.
And it's not uncommon for people in that situation, let's back up. Dealing with, in the field that you dealt with for that many years, you told Mr. Cable that you would have to search sometimes the females, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the things you found when searching the females?
Everything. These girls practically live out of their purse. So it's usually loaded with a lot of needles. Those are passed out freely.
She can answer.
You may continue.
Needles, drugs, knives, razors, clothing.
Would you find weapons, so to speak, on their body?
Usually they try to tuck them either inside their bras or sometimes in the underwear where they think you won't be feeling. A lot of times they will say it's a tampon that's wrapped up in toilet paper that fell out or something. It's not. It's usually a crack pipe or a knife or something of that sort that's wrapped up in toilet paper that you're feeling.
How common is that in your experience?
It's pretty common. Almost all of them have knives. One of them even told me if I had a gun, I'd sell it to get the money. So most of them have knives.
Okay, most of them have drugs on them, those things. And you know that going into the situation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms, I think you told Mr. Cable that there was policies in place back in 2018 that allowed, in fact, people to pull up to try to restrict them from fleeing, correct?
Oh,
Parking the car in a
yes,
certain position.
yeah, they are.
Explain that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
They are, the men are actually, the officers are actually taught to actually pull up as soon as the elements are gotten, because you do not want the situation which happens, you don't want that to occur while they're driving. So as soon as the elements are had, they normally pull up, put the cuffs on, or at least try to, but they pull up against a wall, a door, or whatever they can find. And you'll notice that most of our vehicles have got a ding on that side of the door from that being tried to be opened by the person to get out and flee. So the child locks are on, things of that sort to keep them from fleeing. But once the cuffs are on, they will normally bring them to me to search if it's applicable. If not, I go to them. And that's usually the end of the process on that part.
And in terms of, based on your experience, detective, in this field, why do they want to flee at that point in time?
They don't want to go to jail. They're either dope sick or they just don't want to go to jail, or they've been told by a judge that next time you come back, you're going to do this time, so.
Multiple reasons, correct?
Yes.
And they will also physically fight with an officer, correct?
Yes.
And I believe you indicated to Mr. Cable on direct that a week prior to this August incident, an individual, a female, maced Detective Mathis, correct?
He had to mace her.
He had to mace her, but because of a fight. He had to repel to stop the force. Okay? So you've seen many situations in which male vice detectives have to use some type of physical force to try to effectuate an arrest.
Yes. If they don't get the cuffs on before and they go to pull up to me at the Princeton Club or the library, that's when they sometimes want to take off too. So.
What's so important about getting the cuffs on?
To keep them from doing anything else harm to themselves or the officer.
Protection for both, correct?
Yeah.
And in your experience, when you try to cuff someone and they resist, that's an aspect of noncompliance, correct?
Yes.
If they tell you in advance, don't put your hands on me, I'm going to resist, or I'm not going to do that, that also alerts you, correct?
Yes.
Okay, what do you do in that situation, ma'am?
You've got to, you got to do it safely. You want to, like I said, pull up to that door, get the car stopped to where you can not let them allowed to get out, and get the cuffs on them to the best of your ability. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes they might get one on, and before they're pulling up, or she's trying to get out, still out the door's open.
And part of your training, detective, goes about the force continuum, correct?
Yes.
And the lowest level is 0 and the highest level is 8, correct?
Yes.
And in that situation, that can evolve in a matter of seconds, minutes, correct?
Yes.
And it's a constant situation based on a tense, unpredictable, and potentially violent situation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in that situation, 0 is talking to them, stuff. Hand-to-hand stuff's kind of in the middle of that continuum, correct?
Yes.
Physically trying to grasp them and control them, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you're trained on that constantly, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want to take you now to August 23rd of 2018, okay?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. You actually were at the gun range that day, earlier, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's my understanding there that you're in a facility that's indoor, correct?
Yes.
Has special soundproof walls, things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
And when you were qualifying or you're being trained in firearms, you have to wear ear protection, correct?
Yes.
Why so?
Because it will hurt your ears if you don't.
Okay. What's required there? Is it required at the range?
It's required, yes, that and glasses.
Both inside, small ones, as well as the big head things,
I
correct?
don't think the small ones inside are required, but recommended, but you at least have to have the earmuffs on.
Okay. And in a situation, detective, have you been around a weapon that's been fired when you have not had that protection on?
Yes.
How does that feel to your ears?
It hurts, it rings.
Are you able to hear anything else at that point in time?
Not really. It's almost like slow motion but fast. Kind of hard to describe, but yeah, it's.
Slow motion but fast. When you're in those, okay. In a situation, detective, you were training on, I believe that day was a active shooter response training, correct?
Yes.
And tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is.
I'm not sure if you call it active shooter or not, but you're supposed to shoot until the threat stops, is what they were teaching you. My scenario was involving a dog. The dog is coming at me, and it's barking. They have sound effects and everything, and I have the owner in the background yelling to not shoot his dog, but the dog kept coming at me, so I had to shoot the dog. It looked vicious. It was a Rottweiler in the picture, and it looked like it was going to attack me. So I shot the dog, and then the dog I thought was done, and it wasn't. It came back up, got again, so I had to shoot it again. They also placed a clipboard in my hand to see what we would do with the clipboard. I held on to it the whole time. I don't know why, but I did. But they're testing our reaction to see how we act in this, and that you are to shoot until that threat stops, because obviously the threat had stopped, but it had started back up again.
In your situation, the dog stopped, you thought the threat was done, but then continued, correct?
Right.
They're trying to place you in unpredictable, tense situations to see how you react, correct?
Correct.
And there's three different types of threats that they teach you, correct? Non-threat, intermediate threat, and deadly threat,
Okay,
correct?
yes.
Okay. And with a deadly threat, they train you to teach until the threat is stopped, correct?
Yes.
That means no longer moving or gone or something like that, correct?
Stopped, yes.
Okay. And you went through that course. The other parts of your team actually go through other scenarios, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you all don't get the same scenario.
No.
And I believe an Officer Gagnon walks you through that, or an individual officer from the range walks you through that course.
Correct.
And then you debrief afterwards and you say, hey, here's what I thought, here's what I didn't think, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Then you clean your weapon,
Yes.
and then you guys as a group decided to head out.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in that situation, I think you told Mr. Cable that it was whether or not you were going to get lunch or go to work, correct?
Right.
Is it fair to say that the level of prostitution in that area of town is a little bit higher after lunchtime than it is early in the morning hours?
It varies, but
Okay.
yeah, pretty much it's
Okay.
about that time when you want to go out.
Okay. And so it's my understanding that your first assignment, when you guys decided as a group to go to the west side?
Yes.
Okay. And that's common practice for the team, so to speak, to be in different areas of the west side, Hilltop, Bottoms, things like that.
They'll be driving the streets just to see who's out, because they might not be out on the hilltop, so they're going to be on the bottoms, or they'll be, or they'll say, there's nothing here, let's go east.
But there is no directive or standing operating procedures that says you have to be X place and certain feet away or anything like that from each
No.
other. You guys as a team work the area of the west side of the Hilltop.
Yes.
And the Bottoms, and that's acceptable practices, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you guys communicate through the phone, right?
Yes.
Why is that?
That was really the best equipment at the time that we had. I think we were developing the Colio, but we hadn't got it yet, so and that's not much better, but it's still something better. But that was the best way to get stuff across to somebody, and especially to let everyone else know without using the radio and putting it up to your mouth and trying to be undercover.
You want to try to stay on cover as long
Yeah.
as possible, correct? In order
Correct.
to get those elements. And so your first assignment, I think, was Detective McKissick, who passed away, wanted you to come over and search somebody, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you, I think, mentioned to Mr. Cable that individual had a warrant, so that individual was definitely going to have to go to jail.
Yes.
Okay. And while you were doing that, you received a text. Use that, Dan?
Yeah.
I have the Elmo. I'm going to put on the Elmo what's been marked as State's Exhibit Q to go back over with you, okay? So, do you know what, did you guys leave the range as a team together at the same time or different times?
It was pretty much the same time. I'm sure we didn't like follow in a line, but
Okay. And how did you come about to know that you had to go help Detective McKissick?
I think Daryl had told me that he thought Andy had one, but I didn't know where yet, so we were waiting on that.
Okay.
But I was still searching through her purse, I believe, Daryl's girl at the time.
And just so we're all to be clear, this is a text chain, correct?
Yes.
So on this chain is Laura Evans, Brian Key, Jim McKissick, or who's Jim?
Jim Mathis.
Jim Mathis and McKissick, correct?
Yes.
As well as Andy Mitchell.
Yes.
So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people on that chain.
Yes.
And when these texts go out, they go out to everybody.
Yes.
Okay. And that's meant to say so that the team knows where everybody is and what's going on, correct? Okay. And that's a policy that you guys follow and you're trained on?
Not really a policy, but just good to
A
have.
good police tactic that
Yeah.
you believe helps, communication helps people be safe?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to take it to, the last one I think you mentioned to Mr. Cable that you remember seeing is the Graz, correct?
Yeah.
And with the Graz, that was at 11:30, basically 11:32.
Yes.
Right? And I think you indicated that you had already potentially started driving over to Bellows and to the Bellows area. And why were you driving to that area?
Because previously, like I said, they'd had a problem a week before with another detective.
Okay.
So,
And so that, your instinct and your police sense, so to speak, or spidey sense, sent you to that area?
right, it could be the same girl, it could be another one, but we often see them again. That's not like they stay in jail.
Absolutely. And so the time frame from basically 11:32 until when the time, the next one is 11:33, a minute later, right?
Yes.
So a text goes out to the team, Bellows and Yale doesn't believe I'm an officer.
Yes.
Okay? And if I'm speculating, tell me, but I assume that that means, hey, somebody get here. Somebody come over here.
It's not like a 10-3, but it's
Correct.
definitely, I need some help.
I need some help.
Yeah.
So if someone hypothetically said, hey, I'm texting my buddies, they'll be on their way. When that text goes out, someone believes they're coming over, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's the kind of procedure that you guys follow.
Right.
Okay. And then the time frame from 11:33 to 11:35 and 14, that's where the 10-3 is, right?
Yes.
So that's roughly a little over 2 minutes.
Yes.
So a little over 2 minutes, that short period, the incident's already over. Because that's Mr. Mitchell texting text 10-3,
Yes.
correct? So that in that amount of time, a situation goes from 0 to 8, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that's not uncommon in these situations, correct?
No, it's not.
Thank you, Melissa. So you pull up, you finally get there. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you see.
I see an officer, one of the patrol officers, putting up scene tape, which is meaning it's bad. It's something bad. I didn't know if it was actually involving our situation, but it means something's, they've had to tape it off to make sure that nobody goes into that area.
Okay. And I think you told Mr. Cable on direct that you went and helped with a tourniquet.
Yes.
Describe Mr. Mitchell's wound at that point in time that you saw.
I didn't know where the cut was, but I knew that he had a lot of blood on him. There was a lot of blood flowing. That's why me and the K-9 officer had decided to do the tourniquet. He, obviously with it dripping, you have to worry about things like that, so we went ahead and did that. He dropped off his bracelet, asked me to take hold of that. I actually ended up taking that home with me and washed it off and brought it back a day or two later to the hospital, I think, to him. But yeah, it's just a necessity that you kind of want to do, even if you didn't need to, as a precaution. I mean, people can die easily from a loss of blood.
Describe how Andy Mitchell appeared to you in his demeanor at that point in time. Was he his normal chatty self, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely not.
Out of it?
Oh, yeah, he was definitely shaken.
Shaken,
I wanna
exhausted?
Yeah.
Fatigued?
He was leaning on the thing like he was just like, he
Out of
almost didn't even
sorts?
know what happened. Yeah, it wasn't him.
Didn't know what happened?
I was like, dude, you're okay. You're here. Everything's okay.
Not uncommon for someone who was just in a traumatic critical situation,
No.
correct? Okay. So it wasn't the Andy Mitchell that you knew?
No.
And the tourniquet was placed on by you and Officer Carter, I believe?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you do then?
We waited for the squad. I think at this point I'd found out that they pulled up, they were taking care of her, but I didn't even know at that point. Like I said, that I thought she had fled. when
And
I
at some
first pulled
point,
up.
though, you were asked to take a look at her, correct?
Yes.
And it's my understanding
Well, I
that,
wasn't asked. I don't think I was asked to take a look at her. Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I don't
I
want-
think I just did. I just walked over. I saw them taking her out.
At some point, you were interviewed by a detective, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that detective said, hey, do you recognize this person, Ms. Castleberry, to be the same person that you dealt with a week prior?
Yes.
The week prior, you were called to Detective Mathis to help search a female who he had to mace.
Yes.
Okay. And it's my understanding is that when you looked at the person in the vehicle, you believed you recognized that person, and more likely than not was probably the same person, but you can't say for sure.
Correct.
he's testifying for her, he's putting words in her mouth.
Just re-ask the question, sustain, re-ask the question.
Did you recognize that person?
I thought that I possibly did, yes.
What was your belief that you believe that may have been the same person?
Yes,
Is it fair to say you weren't 100% sure?
correct,
And that's what you told the detective?
yes,
But the similarities and what you saw and observed matched what you believe you recognize as the person from the week before?
correct.
Okay. Now, Mr. Cable indicated that you consider Andy a friend, correct?
Yes,
You consider all law enforcement or CPD brothers and sisters as friends?
I do.
If you were involved in a team and someone had to go to the hospital, would you go to the hospital if that person was part of your team?
Yes,
Are you gonna lie or try to do something that will help Andy Mitchell in this case?
absolutely not.
Why not?
He knows that, but the truth is going to prevail, and that's what's got to come out. So I will take that either way. If he's done something, he's got to deal with that. He
But your
knows that.
testimony today is not as his friend. Your testimony today is in terms of what you did as a detective
Correct.
back in 2018 on that day.
Correct. I have had no contact with him since this, outside of being supportive in the beginning, but I don't want to appear to be biased at all, put it that way.
May I have a moment? Couple things real quick to talk about. You had mentioned earlier that the people, females, in your situation, when the call comes in when you're pretending to be a female prostitute, do the males ever try to flee when they're getting arrested?
Oh, yeah.
Happens, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And then you are also aware of situations when the CPD officers, detectives are males, posing as a John, the prostitutes try to flee, correct?
Yes.
Have you heard of anybody throwing themselves out of a vehicle that's moving?
Yeah, it has happened, yeah.
I'm sorry?
It has happened, yes.
Has happened. So all things are possible in terms of situations when they're trying to flee.
Yes.
And then back when you were in the active shooter situation, when you're trained to shoot to the threat stop, in your mind, you thought the dog had stopped, but the dog didn't stop, correct?
Correct.
You don't have to wait for that dog to reattack you, correct?
No.
If that dog gets up or moves position, you can fire that shot again at the dog without the dog actually attacking you, correct?
Right.
Because the dog's already attacked you once, correct?
It's coming at me, yeah.
It's coming at you. So you have to assume the dog's going to attack you again, correct?
Correct.
Detective, congratulations on retirement. Happy birthday, and thank you for your attendance today.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
Hey, Judge. Shot the dog?
I did. I did. A fake dog, but
That
yes.
doesn't go over.
I know, it doesn't. And I love dogs. I have 4.
Well, look, and I don't mean to put you in, and I'm not trying to say you're biased or anything, but Mr. Mitchell's more than just a regular cop friend to you, right?
I mean, we don't hang out, like, I guess, after work a lot, but,
But he's done some plumbing for you?
oh, yes, he has. He did come to my house, and actually, he works on his own houses. And so he had offered, I needed, how do you call it, the thing that's in the sink that chopped up the food? Yes, he put one of those in for me, and he did 2 faucets for me, I believe.
And have you watched his children?
Yes, I did. I babysat his little girl while he was doing one of the jobs.
Okay. And I think you were in the middle of saying something, and Mr. Collins, I think, not intentionally, but started another question, and you said something about the fact that if he's wrong, then that's what it is.
Yeah, if
What
something,
were you trying to say?
I'm just saying, I don't know of anything that's happened that, that would constitute a murder charge at this point. I mean, if something is shown to me that that's true, Andy knows I'd be the first person to slam my door shell shut. But I don't have that to give anybody.
Right, because you're not on this jury, you're not getting all that.
Correct.
Just little things. I mean, you said that, walkies make noise and stuff. Can you turn a walkie off?
Yes.
You mentioned that when you do these, reverse things and you're on the street, you've at least got 5 pairs of eyes on you, right?
Yes.
Does that change at all how comfortable you are with carrying nothing to show you're a police officer?
Slightly, kind of depends on the day too. If it's nighttime and there's 2 of us girls out there walking and neither one of us have anything, one of us might decide to have something on us because it's dark, you know, and not, even though there's 5 eyes, there's still a chance they might not see something.
Right. And you mentioned one of the things I think you said you were concerned about was if I get kidnapped and dragged into a car, right?
Yes.
And why did you use that example?
That was the demonstration that we've done. If I'm standing too close to the vehicle and the guy reaches in and grabs me and pulls me in, or if they have a van or something, you know, I'm pulled inside, so.
In your experience out there on the street, is that a real fear for prostitutes?
I don't think I recall it ever happening, but I guess it could be.
You've never heard of a prostitute getting robbed,
Oh, robbed, yes.
raped?
They get robbed and raped a lot. They've
okay.
non-payments and everything else, yes,
Right, and drug into cars?
yes, I'm sure.
And is that why you're glad you've got 5 sets of eyes on you in case?
Yeah, because and you're standing very close to this person too, so normally.
Right, no, I get it. And then one little thing, Mr. Collins went to some length to talk about levels of felonies for these crimes, the felony assault. Is solicitation a felony?
No,
What is solicitation?
It's a misdemeanor.
Prostitution. I'm sorry?
a misdemeanor.
That's all I have, Judge.
I think
Briefly, Detective. Detective, I'll pick up where Mr. Cable left off. Is possession of heroin a felony?
Yes,
Is trying to slash someone a felony?
yes,
Is attacking someone with a knife in a confined area a felony?
yes,
Okay. And in terms of, he mentioned about kidnapping, correct?
yes.
Is it fair to say that you guys are briefed on a regular basis back in 2018 about potential things going on prior to August 23rd of 2018, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Was there any knowledge, and you have boots on the ground, I mean, you're there 5 days a week, correct?
Yes,
You interact with the individuals in that community, correct?
yes.
Was there any information that you had seen prior to August 23rd of 2018 that someone was out there kidnapping prostitutes?
Not kidnapping, but robberies.
Okay.
Not,
Robberies.
and not to the prostitutes, to the Johns.
Correct, but there was nothing in any way, shape, or form prior to August 23rd of 2018 of someone kidnapping prostitutes?
Not that I know of,
Someone going around? Okay.
unless it was previous years that I can't remember back, but not, yeah,
Thank you very much, Detective.
All right, step down.
thank you.
Councilwoman approach.
I'll let you go first.
Off the record, Tammy. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our morning break, or our lunch break now. So we're going to start back up at 1 o'clock. Hold on. I always forget to read this, so now I got it printed out on my. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on the case until it is finally submitted to you. We'll see you about 1 o'clock.